What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with my Week 14 NCAA football power rankings. As we get into it here, we got to look at who's dropping from this week's rankings, and it's going to be Washington State. The Cougars suffered a loss. Obviously, they were 8-1, or sorry, 9-1 coming in this game, lost 9-2, and so they're just one of those teams that pretty much needed to win out, needed a lot more to happen for this team to even get considered into a playoff berth, but those chances are out of it now. Then the others receiving votes, Memphis, they're still a very good team. Obviously, they need a lot to happen. They're not going to win their conference because obviously those spots are taken by Tulane and by Army. Colorado State, they need a win, I believe, just a win. And they'll play Boise State in the Mountain West Championship. Louisville's hanging around. Same with Syracuse in the ACC. Two good games for them this week. And then Illinois is that 26 team for me as they're just missing the cut. 21 through 25. This is where you find Kansas State jumping back into the rankings, and they jump all the way to 21 after some losses by all these teams here by BYU, Colorado, and Army. Army's the most disappointing. I thought that would have been a little closer of a game, but offense just didn't show up, and Notre Dame's offense cruised to another big win. Colorado just struggled all game, especially in the second half against that Kansas team. Kansas, one of the hottest teams in college football right now, so you don't want to see them if you're playing them this week. Missouri, it's an okay win by 19 on the road at Mississippi State. Worst team in the SEC. Didn't really have to do too much to get to 8-3. BYU, it's kind of a disappointing loss. They did make it interesting at the end. Put the second back on the game. Completed the Hail Mary, but was tackled at the 3. But BYU still has it in front of them as well as Colorado in the Big 12, even Kansas State as well. It's a big week for the Big 12 as you might have a three-loss team in a Big 12 championship. In 16 through 20, this is where it shifts, and you have Tulane, obviously the American. Last week on a bye, they faced Memphis, who was very good. This game doesn't really mean anything for Tulane, as they're automatically going to the American Championship, but it will look good for them to have a 10-win season. UNLV is another team at 20. They're moving up with their win at San Jose State. They get Nevada this week. They need Colorado State to lose, and UNLV has to win for them to play Boise State in the Mountain West Championship. Then you have those three SEC teams all losing. Bama, I think, is the most surprising, only putting up 3 points in a loss on the road to Oklahoma, pretty much killing their chances at the SEC championship game, potentially a playoff spot as well, as they get Auburn, obviously, this week in the Iron Bowl. Ole Miss plays Mississippi State, should win that one, but disappointing loss there for Ole Miss on the road yet again. They just lose it at the end of the season, pretty much kiss their playoff chances goodbye. Then A&M kind of in the same boat. It was a much closer game. It meant more for the Aggies, but they get Texas this week, and they still have a shot in the SEC championship. So they kind of have a long shot here, but they're going to have to beat Texas and win the SEC championship against Georgia if this A&M team wants to make the playoff. 11 through 15, these teams have it a little easier to get into the playoff. And I'm going to start with Iowa State at 15, jumping up obviously 7 spots here. Win on the road at Utah against Kansas State at home. Now, they win that game, I think Iowa State has a very good chance of making the playoff, regardless if they lose in the Big 12 championship game or not. I think the same kind of goes for South Carolina and Clemson. Both these teams in the same boat. Obviously, Clemson has one more win, but Clemson wins, gets the 10-2, plays Miami in the ACC championship game. It's going to be a question on if whoever wins or loses, if they're going to get in the playoff. Same goes for South Carolina. They win, finish 9-3, beat a good Clemson team. Obviously, it's a non-conference game, so South Carolina is not going to get moving up in the SEC standings, but they finished 9-3, and some teams lose and go their way. The debate is to be had for the Gamecocks, and I think that's the team that we're going to look at in the SEC with 3 losses that could possibly get in. Arizona State, obviously, if they win this week against Arizona, this is one of the hottest teams that's surging and still has a chance at a playoff berth. With their big win over BYU at home, obviously the storming the field twice worked out for them. Arizona State, I just think this team right now is the favorite in the Big 12, which is crazy to say. I think a month ago you wouldn't have said that. But, it is a rivalry game for them this week at Arizona. Then Indiana, where do we even start? I mean, this team played great in the first half. One miscue, the punt, and then that's when it all just fell apart, unfortunately for him. Kirk Cincinnati should beat Purdue in his first time playing them. Obviously, the big rivalry game. Should get to 11-1, and you're crazy if you don't think this team deserves to go in the playoff. Yeah, I get their strength of schedule isn't the best, but you got to beat who's on your schedule, and it's not their fault this year that they chose to have a weak schedule. It just so happened that they had a weak year this year. And if your only loss is to potentially right now the number two team in the country and potentially could be the Big Ten champion and could potentially be the number one team in the country when the playoff starts, that's your only loss. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. If it was an SEC team, you'd put them in. No, no regard. Doesn't matter who the SEC team. If it was Mississippi State, you'd put them in. Just because it's an unlikely Big Ten team, you got to put them in. And then 6 through 10, talk about unlikely. I think you can look at SMU and Boise State. Boise State, yeah, they were expected to be good, but I don't think too many people had them being this good. And you want to talk about being this good? Look at SMU, what they're doing this year. Only lost to BYU. Since then, they've just breezed through ACC play. Should breeze through California yet again this week. Make the ACC championship game. I think it's going to be Clemson. I think Clemson gets in. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's either Clemson or Miami. One of the two is going to face SMU. And then you have Tennessee and Georgia at 8 and 9. Bye weeks for them. Big rivalry games for them where they're heavily favored, so should take care of business there. But the Tennessee Vanderbilt game, I think, is more intriguing than a lot of these other games, just because Vanderbilt at home, we've seen how good they've played against top 10 teams this year at home. And it's also a rivalry game, so Tennessee could be on upset alert. Miami at Syracuse, I think they're on upset alert as well. Cal McCord and the Orange are playing a much better football than they were just a few weeks ago. And Miami, this box score, you can see they won by 28, but they were up what? A touchdown at most with halfway through the fourth quarter, and then one play went their way, and then just put it on them. So I'm not sold on Miami. If they do make the playoff, I think they're going to be one of those one and done teams that gets bounced even hosting a playoff game. And 1 through 5, I think this is kind of what everyone expects here. Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, and Notre Dame. Now, the case is to be had for Penn State. They haven't beat anyone with a winning record this year, so take that as you will. Their only loss is to Ohio State at home and in Indiana. Maybe you could put Indiana in the same case as Penn State. It's just kind of a debate that's to be had another time. And I was tempted to put Notre Dame over Penn State, but Notre Dame's loss to NIU obviously isn't anywhere close to the loss to Ohio State, so it's only right for me to put them at 5. In Texas, coasting yet again. It was a little close game there. They made it interesting in the second half, but pulled away when they had to. Then the game at A&M is a huge game. Obviously, Ohio State hosts Michigan. Huge game for them as they need to get over the hump of beating Michigan, who they haven't beaten the last 3 years. Then Oregon should take care of business against Washington. Obviously, their big rivalry game that, Washington isn't anything this year. And Oregon should come out of the bye week and just blow them out. But it's the last week of college football, rivalry games all around. I expect some upsets that we don't expect. So that's why you got to come back next week to see where your team ranks, and hopefully they're going to make the cut heading into the championship games. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.